Okay, hi everyone. I'm Fatima Rafiki and I'm a graduate student pursuing a master's degree in human computer interaction and design. And it has been a wonderful semester with you all. To start off with my presentation, let me first give you a brief overview of what I do. Basically, I'm a UX designer and I interned at Juniper Networks past summer. So we as UX designers design interfaces for the softwares, the mobile application that you see, the TV layout, smart Android TV layout that you see. All those things are done by UX designers. So this project is one of my passion projects that I did, and it's called Equal Voice. It's an Alexa skill to give everyone a voice. Before I set um, the stage for the project, I would want to ask you all: do you guys know about Alexa skill and how and ever have had a chance to experiment with that? Okay. So Alexa, I see a lot of nods. So Alexa has an open source collaborative sort of a library where you can just add a skill to that. For example, if I am preparing for an examination and there's an application that reminds me of all the vocabulary for that examination, I can add a skill to Alexa and she'll be like my teacher and asking me questions about that. So these are some fun things that you can do and play around with Alexa. So this product is based on a new Alexa skill that gives everybody a voice. So the problem space here that we wanted to focus on is group meetings have become a part of our everyday lives, even our everyday sessions that we had for this class. We used to break out in rooms and had discussions. So it has become a part and parcel of our everyday life. But unfortunately, not all team members are able to participate in group discussions. So that was one of the things that piqued our interest, and I started to research more about it. So the process of UX design is very similar to that what we follow for branding. You first go ahead and start doing some research to gain a solid foundation, and then you understand if it is viable in market, if it is desirable by the client. So something similar along those patterns that you'll observe here. So first we did our groundwork. For the groundwork, as usual, like I mentioned, it was more like a research we do for our brand study. So we had some assumptions, we read some articles to validate our assumptions, to understand user perspective, we conducted some interviews, and we gained some exemplars, what we call design inspiration in branding. So something very similar to that. So this was listing down of how we feel. In UX design, we call it listing down your assumptions, but it is more like a buyer's persona or giving personality to your brand. So there are two user groups for this. One is the personality type is extrovert, say that is me, and the other one is one of my friends whose personality type is introvert. So these are two categories of buyers. So during a meeting, if I have something to say at any point that has been made unknowingly, I keep cutting others. That is my behavior as an extrovert. And there is an urge to be the leader and drive the conversation so that none of the people in the group conversation feel weirded out. And often you don't realize that you've been talking for long and someone has not been getting a chance to speak, or waiting for a long time. The second one would be the introvert personality. So that person keeps on waiting for their turn to come. Sometimes they are like so zoned out of the conversation that they forget what the topic was, and they feel invisible throughout the whole scenario, and it feels demotivating. So we did some literature review. It's more like going and seeking inspiration online of what people are doing. And then we conducted some interviews. These interviews, you can say it's more like focus groups in branding, where you go ahead and conduct some market research. So this research helps you form some sort of background for your creative justification and target audience, similar to UX design, where we do this research to understand the viability and feasibility of the product. Is it still required? What are the things that need to be addressed? Are we targeting at the right audience, or are we barking at the wrong tree? These are the questions that get answered through conducting interviews and market research. So we conducted around 6 interviews with different personality and different people in the industry. And some of the pull-out quotes are here. For example, a senior engineer for Atlassian said that a meeting is considered productive when all members have the feeling of being heard and their ideas are valued. Another person from Microsoft said that he sometimes feels guilty after a meeting, especially when he thinks he has hijacked most of the conversation, and he'd certainly like to be aware if he's doing so. So this gave us a window of opportunity of where our product can intervene and how it can, better facilitate group discussions. So what was validated? The first thing that was validated was individuals often require motivation and encouragement to state their opinions in a group. Second, self-awareness can help individuals reflect upon their actions and making suitable amends. And the third is a meeting is considered productive when all members participate and feel valued. This is exactly something one of the interviewers said, and we found it very, relevant to the idea that we were thinking in the direction of. So, what can overshadowing someone in a meeting result in? So, here is the point where your market research starts narrowing down to your values, like we do in brand. We sometimes gather all the information, build out that mood board, and then we try to build a personality of that brand. So, these were the key factors that were considered. For example, somebody takes the credit of someone else because of overshadowing in a meeting, then team motivation, biased decisions. Suppose there's a meeting of four men and only a single woman there in a meeting. So if the woman is silent, the meeting tends to be more directed towards the male opinions. Therefore, these were the things that were being considered and having a narrower perspective. So this research led us to collect some design inspiration online, kind of like a mood board, but in a different way. So let's see what people have already done. So this was one of the applications that we studied online where women interrupted is a critical design concept that reflects on the fact that women do not get an equal opportunity to speak in meetings and how they are interrupted. So this is an application, a mobile application, which you turn on during a meeting, and that keeps on recording the meeting. And it, because of voice modulation and frequency, it taps on how often the woman is interrupted and what are the and it notifies you, okay, this is the number of times a woman is interrupted. And and people started realizing that it is happening more often than they were imagining it to be. Another was Meet Q. I would encourage you all to see this one. Search Meet Q. It's a genderless voice assistant. So it promotes inclusivity and using a frequency of voice that is neutral. So generally, I don't know if you have all noticed, Google Home and Alexa both come with pre-installed voice for your assistant, and these voice assistants are female in voice because females in the society are considered to be submissive, obedient, homely. So this was one of the controversies that Amazon and Google got into, and then they added the counter male part if you want to switch it to the male part of the voice. So this gender voice assistant promotes inclusivity. So this was one of the values that we wanted to pick up from for our project, inclusivity. And the previous one was having the opportunity of giving everybody an equal voice. So before we wanted to dive deeper into the project, we wanted to define the scope. It's more like talking to the client and asking him, hey, how do you envision this product to be? Do you want it to be scalable to different domains, or do you just want it to be relevant to this particular domain? That defines your visual guideline, that defines your personality of the brand and different things. So we analyzed that this could be potentially extended to Zoom and Teams, where, for example, if we are in a breakout room and having a discussion, there could be a chat prompt. Hey, Fatima, you haven't spoken up for a like good 15 minutes. Would you want to share your ideas? And it will share it to me personally. So something like that. And different thing is it can also be implemented across different scenarios. One of them could be office meetings. Another one could be, hey, say having grocery discussion with your family, or what restaurant do you want to order from this night. So these were the discussions that we were imagining, but we wanted to focus on office discussions. So that was the path that we took ahead. So for the opportunity, I would say this defines the value of your brand. And the question or the problem here was how might we create a conducive environment for everybody to speak up and have equal participation across the team. So these were the three core values that we identified. One was encouragement, second was inclusivity, and the third one was self-awareness. Introducing Equal Voice. This was the product that we introduced. It's an Alexa skill. It turns on group discussion mode upon instruction. So you say, "Hey Alexa, please turn on the group discussion mode," and it turns on that mode, and it does something very. It does. It records your voice. It understands, and first of all, it marks the attendance. It records your voice, and based on who has spoken for how much long, it prompts you, encourages you in a very polite way, and showcases you that okay, this meeting is probably not that inclusive, and maybe it can be made more inclusive. So let us walk you through a scenario. So Jim, Rebecca, Kelly, and Jason, they are four people. I'll quickly go through that. He's a manager, he's a balance speaker. Rebecca is a developer. She speaks when required. It's difficult for us to pause. Then she's Kelly, she's a product manager, and then he's Jason, he waits for his turn. So in a normal meeting, in, Jim introduces the agenda. Rebecca continues to put her point across the conversation, and Kelly starts speaking as soon as the floor is open for discussion, and Jason keeps on waiting for his turn to speak. This was our initial idea, and we did some iterations over it because when we started going out to people, we noticed clear gaps in our design. How did we wizard the behavior? What we did was we imitated Alexa as a phone call, and with that phone call, somebody else on the other hand was behaving like Alexa, and there was a group discussion going on. And we started noticing in the real life scenario that there were clearly a few demerits to that to the idea that we were proposing. It's very similar to when you have your initial draft or design ready in your brand, and then you have to go back to the client. You have to check, okay, what is not working for them, what is the thing that they are not feeling satisfied with, is it something that they strongly disagree with. So it's a similar scenario here. So it reveals some gaps in our concept. One of the gaps was voice and tone. We had not decided on voice and tone. So the Alexa's voice was very robotic, and it did not feel encouraging at all at that point of time. So it needed to be sound. One of our core values was encouragement. So the value of so the voice of Alexa had to reflect that. It should sound more motivating and encouraging. Otherwise, it would be intimidating for the introvert to be asked, okay, all of a sudden, hey, please speak up. Another one was figuring out the mechanism, how we are going to figure out differentiating between a 5 minute meeting and an hour-long meeting, and how we empower users to set the meeting timing. How are we going to set, okay, who is the speaker and what are the different modes of presentation. Say, now I am presenting to you all, and if it starts from prompting every one of you, hey, why don't you speak? So this is a presentation mode, right? So thinking of those boundary cases, thinking of those different cases was important in our concept. So we iterated, we did an engineering check, we detected the number of people in a meeting, different kinds of discussion, and it may sometimes fail to register if someone spoke. What do we do in that scenario? So the final design solution was something very close to Alexa's skill design. There were three components to it. I'll introduce that in a bit. One thing I definitely wanted to ask you all is, have you ever had a chance to design for an existing brand? And if yes, what are the things that you keep in consideration?
Can you repeat the question?
Have you ever had a chance to design for an existing brand, say Starbucks, designing for Starbucks, say designing for Disney? And what are the things, if not, imagine that you have to do it right now. What are the things that will come to your mind that you'll have to consider?
I don't know if this necessarily counts as a brand, but Aubrey and I work for the IU Student Affairs Branding Department. And the main thing is just considering the rules that they already have in place and being respectful of them, but also finding points where you can stretch them and mess with them a little bit too.
Correct. I think that totally counts. IU has an itself established a brand guideline, and then you have to adhere to something like the crimson red. You have to keep that in mind, and where are the things. So designing for an existing brand, like I was doing in this case, was very similar. I was designing for Amazon, so it was important for me to consider what their design language is, what are their brand assets. So for that, I started exploring that, and I share my tab here. So can you see this? Okay. So these are the Amazon Alexa Auto Toolkit that they provide. It's an open source thing that they want you to use as a part of their integration. So we had to, use the same logo, same icons when we were designing, and then we have to consider the things like keeping a safe space. That was very important. Uh, uh, Keeping the brand identity intact while you were designing for that existing brand. And then they also had laid out certain guidelines for their screens. So in brand identity, we call it a brand guide. Here we call it UX design library. So this was a part of the library, and they mentioned how much. There was a separate document where they mentioned how much the space they want here, what is the font they want here, what are the primary fonts, what are the secondary fonts. So these were the things that we had to take into consideration. Moving on. So this was the final design solution. This was the style guide that we proposed for an app that will be integrated as a part of Amazon's Alexa. So because the whole vibe was office meetings and office environment, what we did was we picked colors. We did some mood boarding around it. We analyzed things that were happening, and what were the color choices that people were happening. We analyzed Gmail. We analyzed um, um, different mood boards, and we finally thought that a coffee cup is an ideal representation of um, the office setting. So we decided on choosing a color palette that could replicate that part. And the typography we chose were very formal: IBM Flex Sans and IBM Flex Sans Semi Bold. Those were the two colors, and all the colors here show the office feeling and reflect that formal feeling, and the meeting to be friendly. Because of the coffee, you have the color of the coffee makes you reflect that okay, you want to establish bond, or have a more inclusive meeting, reflection of meeting. So that was something that we kept in mind while defining the style guide. We also utilized a soft gradient consisting of more warm colors, which felt like a perfect fit for equal voice. The color palette evokes the feeling of being in an office space, merged with the navy blue to give a very calm vibe. Now let's see how things change after we place Alexa on the table. It's a short video. I'll play it. Just let me know if you're able to hear the voice once it plays. Are you able to hear it? Oh, 1 second then.
There should be a button on your share screen. You have to share with audio, if that might be an option, like the problem.
I've set up this meeting to look at our progress so far.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah.
Before we begin though, Alexa, turn on group discussion mode.
Okay, turning on the group discussion mode. Have a productive session, you all.
My week did not go that well. It all began with oh, I agree. My application kept crashing as well.
Oh, I love that as well. I will mention it when Rebecca pauses.
And finally, though a busy week, it was success.
My turn.
Oh yeah, it was great. I just heard back from
Guess I can go when she pauses.
we should definitely do that in our next release.
Wow, you guys are killing it. I just heard you guys are planning to add a voice interface to the next release. We have not heard from you, Jason. What do you think about this?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. I think we should check last month's reports. Alexa, send us last month's reports on our phones.
Sure, Jason. The reports are on their way to you all.
Thank you. I wonder if my theory still works.
That was a great discussion, everyone. I think we got some good pointers out of it. Let's head out for lunch together.
Hey, you forgot me here. That was a productive meeting and it was great hearing from everyone. Smell you later, alligator.
Okay, so this was a quick demo of the presentation and these are the screens. I won't take much of it, the time, but this is something I was mentioning. We had to follow all the guideline, and this is that when you search in Amazon's Alexa, you search for equal voice, it shows you this. And these are the same fonts, same padding, same margin, and same colors that have been used for Amazon's Alexa's device. While we were creating an interface for the Alexa show, that's something very similar to Google Nest. So we had to follow Amazon's safe space guideline. These are the icons that have been taken up from Amazon, and all of this had to be, resonate with the idea of the brand. So once enabled, activate equal voice by prompting Alexa turn on the group discussion mode. You can see that in the show. So we designed different interfaces, and like I was mentioning, different modes of presentation and selecting your meeting category, Q&A mode, presentation mode, group mode, and different interfaces and screen size adaptable for each one of them. So you had to fall back to the design library or the brand guideline for referencing of what to go and how to design it. And the Amazon show also displays you the meeting health in terms of color, like the red shows least inclusive and blue shows most inclusive. So deciding on those colors, red is a symbol of okay, something is not working, and blue is okay, something is good. Maybe it's a constructive meeting. So deciding on those colors was something that we came up with, and this was our playground. So while we were designing for the Alexa show, we could experiment more, but while we were designing for the app, it has a set particular guideline that we had to follow. So it's very important to ask your client in the early process of where you can play around, what are the things that they are very particular about, and what do you need consistency with. So that will help you, define your boundaries and meet the client's expectation, and arrive at a common point. So yeah, these are the couple of screens, and thank you so much. Do you have any questions?
I have a couple of questions, if I may. First, I just want to say this is an amazing idea. As someone who is on the more talking too much end of things, I think this would be really helpful as like a little reminder to zip it sometimes and listen. So my first question was, do you have to input the number of people in the meetings before the meeting and their names ahead of time so that it knows how many voices to listen out for?
Yes. So while you start the meeting, you have to mark your attendance as a part of the meeting. So there will be a facilitator of the meeting. Say the manager will be the facilitator, and that person will add you to the meeting, and you have to mark your attendance to the meeting. So I skipped those technical details just to make it more relevant to the class and like have the common proper balance. But yeah, I would love to talk about it more if you want to know.
Yeah, for sure. And then my second question is, I don't know, this is something I wondered when you were talking about how you needed to maybe shift the tone of voice. And I was curious if you had thought or done any research on whether the gender of Alexa's voice affects people's reaction to the suggestions.
you know?
That's an excellent question. I think we did some research on voice UX and how the tone and modulation should be and how they should be more encouraging. And we also played around with punctuation marks like comma, exclamation, like she said, "Smell you later, alligator." So that had to be played around with exclamation marks, and then you had to mention the personality with which she speaks. So Alexa catches up very fast with that, but we didn't exactly experiment with the voice, whether it has to be a male or a female. So I think that's a good space that we can take this in, and we can like experiment more. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions. Thank you, Mallory, Natasha, Lauren, Sydney, Anna.
Really, really nice job on this. I think that now that all of you have this shared foundational knowledge of branding, can you see how that same process plays into even developing something like this that's a more UX software base? They still went through the exact same process of researching and defining the target audience and defining parameters with a client and having that round of revisions almost where you test it out and you see, is this working? What did we not think of? What do we need? And ultimately then fitting it into an actual visual system. So it's such a great example, and it was so well demonstrated through your chat that this is a very circular process where you really get to start from the beginning and set all these goals and bring it around and integrate all the things that you find. So really well done. I hope you all really enjoyed that. I think that this is yet another one of the many extensions of brand design that you could explore, especially if you're interested in that type of space. It can be applied so easily, these concepts. Fatima, when we were looking at this first, we're kind of laughing because her initial presentation of this project was already pretty much perfectly in order with our brand development process. It was just about using different terms that we use in branding that are different from the terms that they use in UX UI. So Fatima, could you tell us just a little bit about how maybe you see the branding terms being helpful for you moving forward, even in a more software digital space?
Okay, so before taking this class, I was more like, we conduct research, we develop around an idea, and we do some visual design, and we have this product. But now there are so many stages to visual design itself for me. One of the things that I really like about branding is developing that mood board. I still use it in different projects. I wish I could share my screen and show you all that. There are so many projects I'm using that mood board for, and it works like a charm. And I feel that they are like parallel tracks working on the same thing, just calling it different. So we have there is market research in branding, we have user research in UX design, there's client expectations in branding, then we have product viability in UX design. So they are very, very similar to each other. And understanding branding in detail through this course, I think I've gained a better sense of visual design and how I can make my products more inclusive and more likable for users and the business both.
Yeah, great. So I hope that's helpful for all of you too. One of your reflection questions is asking you about if you have an interest in pursuing branding in the future now, if this at all piqued your interest. And I'm really curious to see what you all say, because even if maybe it's exactly what Fatima said. If you're on parallel tracks, there are a lot of parallel tracks to branding. You can go into advertising, marketing, you can go into entrepreneurship, business, you can go into UX, software, front end. I mean, you have all these parallel paths that you can really use this knowledge across. So I would love if, when you guys answer that, you were all willing to share, even if you have the idea of maybe following a different path. If there's a piece of this that you think could still apply. One thing that I'll say that I think is also really helpful to remember is that the client interactions that we've discussed this whole semester. So, you know, how we've talked about how to manage their expectations. Why do we show them the things in the order that we do, you know, starting in black and white? And how do we help guide them with that creative justification and pivot with it? That can apply to any type of visual design work, or honestly, any type of job negotiation that you ever find yourself in from here on out. So when you're reflecting, I guess this is me just trying to prime you for really piecing apart the parts of this class and thinking about how all those little things could maybe be useful, so that you don't get them all stuck together in one one branding blob. They're really applicable across the board. So I'm happy that you could all hear about this, what I think is just such an ingenious product that Fatima and that team came up with, and really integrating research well and target markets well and application well, and being a good example for what we've all been striving to do this semester. So again, very well done. Thank you all for your questions too as she went. So